G'day, Ancient Mahar here. And yeah, in this video, things are falling all over the place here. I just wanted to talk a little bit about, just a second here, BPD breakups, codependents, and how you need to bridge the gap in recovery. So what is the gap that you need to bridge? Well, so many people with codependency start out with this logic, right? Applying logic to the circumstances and the situation and trying to figure out what just happened, no matter what just happened. A discard, a ghosting, silent treatment, yelling, screaming, episode. Oh, sorry about that. This phone doesn't know how to behave itself. So whatever the case, there's chaos and drama going on if you're still in the relationship, or if you're recycling the relationship. If you're an ex and you're out of the relationship, but you haven't got no contact, but you haven't got no contact, that's going to be another issue. So here's the thing, right? People with codependency start out trying to understand what's happening or happened to you, what's gone on, what did they just do, did they just ghost you? Did you have to break up with them? Will this contact ever end? All these questions and more. You start off with logic. And logic is anathema to the way that people, especially untreated with BPD, operate, work, behave, what motivates their behavior. Because they're into a variety of BPD magical thinking, which is really believing what they feel is what's really real. So like I mentioned in another video recently, that's where there is no bridge. You want to bridge the gap of your understanding, not necessarily thinking that you can repair or have these relationships work out. So in trying to bridge that gap, people are trying to learn all they can about BPD or like BPD or NPD or comorbidity both and all these other things. And it's like, that's all logical, understandable, but steeped in your logic and your intellect, and you're trying to take in information. And then the key thing here too, and I've spoken about it a bit in the last video maybe, where I called it perspectives when I really meant narratives. Because what happens is you have your experience and you're like, I don't know what just happened, but you're in agony about it. And it's just horrible what happens to people. And these relationship breakups, BPD relationship breakups, are very unique, very complex. So it's important to realize that too. And you're not alone with how you feel wherever you are with this. So going from the logic, and especially for men, but women have logic too. So they're trying to figure it all out logically. And you're applying your logic to their magical thinking of that they believe everything they feel is real. That means that gap has, what does the gap lack? Never mind what the relationship seemed like and who they seemed like and what wasn't really happening, but what you might still feel like was happening. That gap has to do with there can be no meeting in the middle of objective reality, of what's happened in the relationship or what's happening now, whatever else is going on. So with that then, it's like you're coming from a logical place, as people do in relationships. They try to say, hey, why did you just get so upset because? Or, how come you're like yelling at me? What did I do? You try to ask reasonable questions, logical questions, and they're coming from a totally feeling place. So people with codependency have to get into therapy is the first thing I would recommend if you're not already. And the second aspect of this is, so you're going from your logic that isn't really working, that isn't really going to help you out, and you go from that logic to the gap of confusion, no closure. They can't meet you in objective reality because they're on their own planet of emotional reality. That's reality for the person with untreated BPD. It's all about emotions and what they feel. And a lot of those emotions, as I've said before, they're coming up in a triggered passion from the past, but you're like, until you understand that. And even then, everything, so it's so personal. Of course, you're in a relationship and you're getting annihilated and then some, and you're losing yourself. But the reality is, they're not seeing you. They're not really screaming at you. They are, aren't they? Because you're there and you're absorbing it. Yes, you're getting hurt. But more to the point, they're yelling at a wounding parent from the past. So you have to just start to think about that, try to understand that, to depersonalize all of the experience, which is like something that needs to be processed in therapy. You can't just sit there and think that for 10 minutes and it all gets better. So in the gap is your confusion, is your cognitive dissonance, is that nothing makes sense because you're trying to look at it from this logical perspective. And then the other thing is they don't meet you in objective reality in the gap, so in the middle between logic and emotion. They're totally all in emotion. You're trying to logically figure this out, or after, And for people, sometimes they've been out of these relationships for considerable periods of time, including years for some people, still can't stop ruminating. Gonna have more coming on that soon. Still can't stop ruminating because you're still trying to apply logic. Too much thinking is what's happening. And why does that happen for people with codependency so often? Because it's the way that you continue to abandon yourself. Because what I have discovered, a way of articulating that I've been dealing with clients for years, is, like in a general way here in a video, is that people with codependency, many, not all, need to learn how to turn toward and focus on self. It's not something that's in the lexicon of understanding, especially emotionally for people with codependency. Obviously, when I say you need to focus on yourself, you know what I mean. But it's not a logical, intellectual focus. So in this bridging the gap then, so you got the person with untreated, especially BPD, is in the emotion side. You're on the logic side and the gap is in the middle. Now, once you're out of that relationship, or you're having a time out of it, so to speak, in recycling of the relationships or ghosting and you don't know. But once you are out of it, too, especially, then what needs to happen and why therapy is so important to help people with codependency, because it involves healing from the relationship. What's been triggered in you in the relationship? How much of yourself have you lost in the relationship? More to the point, though, codependency being a dysfunctional relationship to and with yourself, how much do you really know yourself? And especially after the relationship. And that's in an emotional, relational context, that question I ask. Not, you might do well in work. You might do well in lots of areas in your life, and you know yourself strongly there. Or you might have, but you might not after the BPD relationship breakup. So here's the thing. You need to move, people with codependency need to move from the logic, realize the gap, that they can't meet you in objective reality, and there is no closure. And closure is not the most painful driving force. Some people may say, yes, it is, because that's how they feel. And again, your feelings are really important. But then people with codependency have to go past the realization, radically accepting the gap, that there's no objective meeting in objective reality, if the person would even talk to you anymore, or you want to talk to them ever again. And the communication deficit, see my video on that, with people with untreated BPD. So then codependents need to go across the gap into their own emotional landscape and a focus on self. And this is what a lot of people with significant to severe codependency need help in therapy to be able to learn how to do. Why do I put it that way? Because for a lot of people, codependency started in your childhood. And in one way or another, you were trying to help, enable, rescue, fix, to get your needs met in childhood. This is a pattern that gets extended out into adulthood. And when this happens to children, whatever it is that causes the codependency, adverse experience to varying different degrees, some with cluster B parents, some not, etc. When this happens in your childhood, you are in pursuit of your needs as a codependent through other. So it's not so dissimilar to the borderline, but it's not exactly the same. So they're trying to get identity through you, They have no boundary between self and other, and you as a codependent are trying to help them as much as you can because you need something to come back to you. And why do you have that externalizing out repetition compulsion pattern that does not work? Goes back to your wounded child, wounded inner child now, and the reality that you needed to pursue, chase, please, be, do, achieve. There was no love. There was not enough love. Your needs were not met because of who you were. And for a lot of people with codependency, they weren't really seen or heard in childhood. It's a recipe that gets people into these relationships with borderlines or narcissists, and you don't know what's about to happen. So it's going from the fact that you're using all the logic in the world to try to bridge a gap, to deal with whatever part of the process you're in this, and the person with BPD is coming from totally emotion, and they don't have a lot of awareness of how they impact others untreated. So you have to bridge that gap where there's no objective reality, radically accepting what is when maybe you still don't know, like, what is? I'm so confused, I don't understand, and it's very much agonizing. And then you need, as a codependent, to move to the emotion, from your logic to the emotion. Get into therapy. I'm out here to help you if I resonate with you, because you need to learn how to be able to focus on yourself, and more importantly, your emotions and your emotional landscape. This is the way through the journey to heal and recover, not only from codependency, family of origin, to self-differentiate, and a whole other, lots of other moving pieces, and how to heal from the cluster B relationship, because the endless codependent focus on the borderline, on the logical understanding intellectually of information about this is, yes, in balance, it's understandable, and it can and help you. But when you're in that logic, video watching, understanding, intellectual place, you're still abandoning yourself. And many of my clients need help to get to their emotions and emotional landscape, and many people with codependency do. So I hope that just adds to something for you to think about today. And if you're not in action yet, meaning in therapy, then you need to get in therapy. Even if you're recycling the relationship, even if you haven't broken up yet, or you just got ghosted, you don't know if it's over or not. So codependents really need to learn how to look at what you feel, what you felt, how hurt you are, what happened, and then realize that in the logic of it all, as you're trying to figure it out, some of that works against you. You layer meaning on top of it, sometimes from misinformation, or confusing information from all different sources. And then you layer a narrative on top of that. And that's the narrative that we see being put forward all across the internet, and on my channel here, and I'm sure other channels. And that narrative is when you've taken your experience and now you've joined a larger narrative of they're all like this, they're all like that, they all did this, she did this, he did that. And yes, it's your experience, and there's nothing wrong with that. But people can get blocked from getting into the action of getting into therapy, of moving from the gap that you tried to bridge, that you need to radically accept to get into the only way to heal this is not endless focus on the cluster B. You can do that it's healthy to do that somewhat in a balanced way when you're in therapy and you're looking at the emotional reality of what you've been dealing with, your emotional landscape, and the reality that what's keeping you so hooked into this, so ruminating, etc., which I'll have more coming on, it's really not as much about the cluster B as people think it is. Because why is it, do you think, as a codependent, that you're so locked into loving somebody who really doesn't exist as the person that you thought they were? So with that, I hope that's helpful, because you got to go from logic to the gap where there's no closure, no objective reality sharing, and the people with untreated BPD have no, check my videos on communication deficits and impossibility. They just aren't conscious of so much that's going on, and I will have videos coming on what are they conscious about, and what they can do sometimes with that, which is very wounding and damaging to people. So people with codependency need to move into, yes, that most adverse, scary, uncomfortable third part of you going from logic to bridging the gap to realizing there's no objective reality to realizing you can't fix this, you can't change this, you can't get them back, they're never going to be who you thought they were. Moving into therapy, into your emotional landscape. That's where the healing and recovery journey really happens, really takes place. So I hope that was helpful. Everybody, take care.